Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Colson Whitehead's The New York Times bestseller. It was on Oprah's Bookclub in 2016. It is The Underground Railroad. This is a fiction novel. It is historical fiction. I've read the book. Dwayne has not read the book, so we thought this would be kind of interesting, or at least I should say I thought it would be interesting and helpful, because a lot of times when I give these book reviews, I'm doing it from a sense of I've already read the book. So I thought this would be good because there'll be someone here who hasn't, who can ask them questions that I may not think of answering, and it can kind of have a dialogue. So overview of the book. Again, it's historical fiction. It follows two main characters. Really, it follows one main character, Cora, who is a young slave girl who was born on a plantation. She's never seen outside of her plantation, not even past the yard. And, she's on this adventure where she meets another young slave named Caesar, where they decide to run away. Cora herself, she's always been an outcast. A lot of her development and the reason she is the way she is because her mother is one of the few, actually the only slave on the plantation that has escaped and never returned. So she's always felt this form of neglect where she didn't really have anyone raising her. She didn't really know much about her mother, and her mother left her for freedom, and she has no idea where she is. She's somewhere up north is what a lot of people believe. And also follows another dynamic, a slave catcher. So it's the journey of the slave catcher who his biggest regret is that he never found Cora's mother, and he feels like this is his second chance on redeeming himself by finding her daughter. So it's kind of like an adrenaline rush where you're taken on this journey of this underground railroad that Cora and Caesar on. And the cool thing about this, the Underground Railroad is actually a real railroad. So it's a locomotive with engineers, conductors, all of that. So super, super interesting. With that being said, what are some questions that you think a reader probably would want to know before reading this?
I don't know. I mean, to me, it sounds like underground is what I was thinking.
It actually, okay, so if you guys...
The show.
Yeah, there was a show called Underground. It was only for 2 seasons, right? And I forgot what network it was on.
WGN or something.
Yeah, WGN.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. It was such a great show, but it didn't get renewed. And the premise of that story was actually very similar in some aspects. Had a good love story. It had 2 people running away, but they ran away with more than just the 2 of them. And
it had a slave catcher.
It had a slave catcher's version as well, of following him and his son trying to catch the people. The ways that it's different is, again, this is a physical underground railroad system, which is very important because of the transportation version of it, and also just the element of all of the I guess it's not really different because you don't really know where you're gonna land, but really Caesar and Cora were more so blind going into this. They literally had to rely on wherever the locomotive essentially stopped. Oh, and another part that makes it different is this book really shows the dynamics and how every state literally was like a different world and had a different view on oppression and a different view on the slave system. So for instance, the first place that they got off at, they really thought it was going to be a safe haven. They thought it was going to be safe and everything was going to be great. And it turned out that they were basically trying to, all that free medical care and all these free systems were actually experimenting on the runaways against their will and literally trying to sterilize the women. Ask the question again.
So what makes a book special or like a bestseller? Because kind of what I hear is it sounds like a usual or traditional escape from slavery story, Underground Railroad story, except that the train is real, or the railroad is real.
Aside from the rail, that is a big part of it, but it's not really as big of a part that you think. This is truly an adventure story, meaning if you take out the slavery, if you take out it really, if you just take out the slavery, this is an adventure-packed, action-packed, crazy adventure. Like, it also varies because the historical context of them showing the differences between state lines. Like, a lot of times in the slavery books that I've read, it is that journey and that adventure of them trying to escape, but they don't really stop in all these multiple different areas across America to show the different impacts and to show the relationships with the natives, to show the relationships with basically like free black men, to show free black men that were in the South going west. There's so many stops here. It also, again, talks about like the medical system, not medical system, but shows some of the distrust of how historically blacks may distrust doctors and hospitals, and it goes into a lot of deeper layers and somehow wraps it up into one book. Another difference is we get a lot of the slave catchers' realm. So we not only see the hierarchy as far as from race relations, but also from just economic status. Like, you know, you have the rich and wealthy slave masters, you have the poor slave masters, and then you have the poor whites who literally all they survive on is catching Negroes. And like what that means to them.
So South Carolina comes up several times. Is that where like a majority takes place, or?
No, I would say that's a catalyst to the story. Basically, that is kind of where the idea of freedom shifts. Meaning, when they first get to South Carolina, because it's not slavery, they feel like they're free. But then they realize that there's different forms of slavery versus thinking just because I don't have a master that I can point out that I'm actually free. So they kind of realize that quickly that, yeah, this isn't freedom.
Okay. So since you said that, what it sounded like was, you know how people say maybe welfare is like a crutch or something, or like, I don't know the proper context to say this, but like, was that what the author was trying to get at? Like, even though it seems like things are helping us, or it seems like things are...
No. Because welfare, I mean, depending on your side of how you feel about that, that's not really something where you're actually putting medical, like it's medical reasons as to why you're hindering or hurting people. Like you can say aiding people and not giving them the resources or tools to sustainably build on their own is hurting them, but that's a completely different ball game than like if you think about the syphilis treatments or some of the stuff that are in history that America has done to black people as far as against their knowledge or against their will or consent. You're making these women sterile, or you're literally pumping diseases in them and using them as test rats. Okay, so based on this explanation and all the questions, do you think you would read it?
I probably would not read it. I give it a 2-star chance that I would read it.
What?
It just seems a little too cliche for me. I couldn't, from my questions and the answers, I couldn't see what makes us different from any other show or
So what do you
anything else.
mean? What, how did it seem cliche?
They escape from slavery and they have an adventure. I mean, it's always going to be an adventure.
You don't know, because I don't want to spoil. I didn't want to spoil because that takes away a lot of the fun. Not everybody, one, escapes. And then two, it's not the escaping from slavery part. It's literally the first beginning of the book. The adventure starts in South Carolina. And it's literally American history of the different states.
Yeah, I just feel like we've seen that in a lot of different
You
things.
have not seen that, I'm telling you. There's not a book like this. There's not even a show like it. Even when you say Underground, the only difference with Underground is they show the slave catchers.
I'm not saying there's like one necessary thing, but it sounds like a culmination of a lot of different things I've seen or heard already.
You haven't.
And so it doesn't make it interesting to me.
You're missing out. Don't be like Dwayne. Mm-hmm. Read the book.
So, for instance, there was that book that you talked about with the football players.
He's talking about underground airplanes.
Yeah. So, like, something like that is not something that I a concept that has ever been.
And this book was 10 times better than Underground Airplanes, just FYI. So, but you probably would like Underground Airplanes. I like that book, kind of. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the book, the difference is that slavery actually never ended in the South. So there's some free, if there are free people and there are free not, but it's literally the modern world. So we have like telephones, we have TV, the NFL players are actually slaves, which is an interesting thing. So like the owners are slave owners, and so some people play sports for a living. So anything that you make money off of, like the people who work in offices, those are still slaves. So that's the concept of that book. It's still a good book. This one 10 times better.
Okay, we'll see if I read it.
Yeah, we'll see. Thank you so much for watching. See me in the next one.